It's premiere day as we kick off season 8 of the Producer Podcast. Not only is our new season premiering, but today's guest just released his latest feature, Ordinary Angels, into theaters today. So join me in welcoming producer Kevin Downs to the show as we delve into his producer journey and producing true stories such as I Can Only Imagine, I Still Believe, Ordinary Angels, and many more. So without further ado, let's get started. So thank you very much, Kevin, for taking the time to come on to the Producer Podcast today.
It's good to be here. Good to meet you.
Yes, you as well. So I guess to start, I'd love to just kind of hear how you got started in the industry and what kind of drew you to producing projects, because I know you've also done a lot of acting in film as well.
Yeah, in high school and college, I was an actor, and I thought that was the route I was going to take, and did for like a decade. And God was at the center of some decisions in my early 20s. There was no industry for independent faith-based movies.
Hmm.
And so it was like, look, you do kind of what is going on in Hollywood, and you just turn stuff down until you find something you like, or you try to create your own path. And so chose the latter. And it was really, I didn't really understand what producing was. It was really when I got cast in a movie, a small little independent movie called End of the Harvest, uh,
Okay.
by Rich Cristiano. And myself and David White were cast as the two leads. And it was Rich that said, you guys should get into producing. You guys are really smart. I mean, you would probably do really well. And and we actually listened to him. So from that, David and I did, we did like 3 movies out of the gate together. We didn't know what we were doing, but we had to go raise the money and develop the scripts and figure out what a budget was and a schedule. I mean, we had no training, we had no schooling, it was none of that stuff. And the budget for the first film, a little tiny movie called The Moment After, the budget was like $20,000, and we went over by 300%. So it ended up being a $60,000 film. And but the movie did really well, and it was a huge training session for how to make a movie. And but without that encouragement from Rich Cristiano, I don't know if either one of us would ever have thought that we could actually produce something. And you look at David's career in Pure Flix and almost 100 movies or whatever they've done, and then what we've been able to do is really, I think, is really extraordinary, to the point where only God could figure out a path to figure all of this out, this productivity out. So I'm always amazed when I look back, because I'm like, look, we're not smart enough to figure this out on our own. There's just no way. There's got to be doors that open, and a lot of persistence and a lot of rejection, to be able to chart the path that we've been blessed to be able to be on. And every day I certainly count my blessings, and I treat every movie as if potentially it's the last one I'll ever do. Because you just never know. I mean, every film you start over, and the whole process starts all over again, as if it's your very first movie. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter what the budget is. Everybody starts at the same point when you're starting
Yes.
the movie. But yeah, I mean, it's been quite the journey now, 30 years later, to see kind of how far it's come, and to see multiple producers being able to get their films in theaters, and more importantly, to see audiences show up. Because if the audiences show up,
Right.
movies aren't going into theaters, period. And so people, if they haven't figured it out, they need to know we make the movies for the audience. We don't make it for ourselves. It's really us, um, trying to figure out what we believe the audience wants, and just really being obedient to what God wants in our life, and being obedient to what we believe the audience wants. And so that's sort of how it started and how it worked out. So it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, no, sounds like it. And yeah, no, it's been cool. Even I'm very new to the film industry, but watching even just how the faith-based audiences continue to come out and that has
Yeah.
grown. I am kind of curious since you have done a lot of acting and that's how you got kind of your start in the industry. How did being like on that side of the camera influence the decisions you make as a producer when you're working on projects?
Yeah, it influenced it a lot because not only have I acted, I've directed like three or four different things. I wrote a couple of things. I'm definitely not a writer. It's just not, it's writing is so frustrating. I'm like, I can't handle this. Forget about it. And so that I don't have a passion for it either. I love acting, but I also love putting projects together. It's just a lot of fun. And so you got to really find your passion. And so I dabbled with a lot of different jobs and whatnot within making an actual movie, and found what my passion is, and have really gravitated towards that because it's too hard otherwise. I mean, it's impossible to get a movie made. So if you don't enjoy it, you shouldn't start it at all.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's my advice to people. So but yeah, the acting had a huge influence on it. Originally when we did The Moment After and then our second film, Mercy Streets, uh, David and I really at the time, I don't know if either one of us envisioned ourselves as just like movie producers. We made those two movies honestly to just cast ourselves. I mean,
Okay.
that was the deal. And actually, the third movie as well, a movie called Six, The Mark Unleashed, that I directed. Great cast in that movie, but again, we did it to cast ourselves. So I don't do that anymore. I care more about the overall product
Hmm.
than I do about a personal agenda. But that's how you get your start. That's okay. I mean, hey, look, if that's what it takes to be able to get going, and then God unveils to you what your true purpose is, then hey, do it.
I know over your career, you've done a lot of movies based or inspired on true stories, including your latest one, Ordinary Angels. And so I was curious to hear how you go about deciding if a true story is worth the effort to turn into a movie.
A true story is absolutely worth the effort because I think what we have found is audiences gravitate more towards true stories. Like there's relatability points in the films that just make them want to come and check it out and see it. It's why you see Hollywood studios, they're either doing big pieces of intellectual property,
Hmm.
or they're doing true stories. And it helps if the true stories are something that's known, so people have a connecting point. So yeah, it's hard. Look, it is really difficult to do just a made up story, an original idea. And that's why people complain about it. But I got to be honest, it's tough to get audiences to want to buy into it. And so that's why you don't see very many of them.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so then, at least for you as a producer, when you come across a true story, like what attracts it to you as like, oh, this is one that I want to help tell?
Yeah, I mean, if it moves me emotionally, I mean, that's the thing. And we're trying to do true stories that showcase the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, that's what Kingdom Story is. And so
Hmm.
there's varying degrees of how much faith is sort of put into the scripts. Sometimes the faith is very thematic in its elements. Ordinary Angels be a good case of that. True story about a mega church out in Louisville, Kentucky. But this church and its lead pastor, Dave Stone, were at the center of this entire story. So thematically, it's woven completely throughout it. A little different than Jesus Revolution, where Jesus is in the title and the entire movie is about, this whole Jesus movement and true life story that happened in the early 70s and people coming to Jesus. And it's just sort of a retelling of
Hmm.
one of the many stories that happened during that time. So, we're looking for variety in the stories that we tell. We don't necessarily want to continue to beat the same drum, though we do like to go back to the music biopic, and we've done a couple of sports stories. But you got to have variety in some of the things that you do. We're trying to get into military and some of the true military stories. We've got one we've picked and are developing. That's definitely that's something we haven't tackled yet on a bigger scale, and something that we're looking forward to kind of diving in on in the next couple of years. So
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds good. I definitely always enjoy seeing the military true stories. So I'll be looking forward to that one.
God, faith, family, country, freedom. I mean, it's like it's all of it. So stories that are worth fighting for protecting your faith and protecting your family, protecting your country, and all that just good stuff. So whenever there's been a ton of good movies that you've seen. That American Sniper is a good example. Lone Survivor's
Hmm.
another one that are favorites of mine. And so you know, if done right, those movies can be really great. So I look forward to hopefully we can get one off the ground and see if we can throw our hat in the ring.
Yeah, kind of with those true stories. One thing I always hear talked about a lot is like the artistic license of where you change things to make it more friendly for a film format. So, like as a producer, how do you decide, is this an aspect that we should use artistic license in to tell the story, or no, we should stick to what actually happened?
Yeah, always you've got to change some things. And so what's happened, at least for our films in the past, oftentimes the things in the true story that are most extraordinary are the things that we have to dial back. And
Okay.
so, because it already the stuff that's just seems there's no way that happened is already exists in the true story itself. And so I don't know if we've ever gotten into a place where like, man, we need to make something up that's just crazy. What a crazy good idea to be able to make this work. That doesn't, because otherwise we're not going to do the movie. There's just no story there.
Right.
Um, so usually it's the other way around, and it is true. You got to change things because what I didn't know even before I got into this, telling true stories, is every story is not a perfect 3 act structure as far as how it's told. So you've got to have some
Hmm.
connected tissue. In our past stories, we've had composite characters where we will combine 2 real life characters into one because it just makes it better for the page and it makes it better for the story itself. Um, so there's just little things that you've got to do to be able to make it compelling so the audience is truly engaged. That's a tricky thing because people were like, oh, you didn't tell this thing the right way or that thing the right way, and it just feels wrong. And it's like, well, no, we're not not trying to deceive anybody. You've
Hmm.
got to be able to tell a compelling story. So really it's based on a true story is probably more accurate instead of you're retelling an actual true story verbatim. And once you get into it, you actually understand it and figure it out. In the early days, I would fight it, and I would just like, but then it doesn't work. I mean, at the end of the day, it
Hmm.
doesn't work. So if you don't make a great movie, then there's no point in telling that particular story.
Right. That's for sure. With true stories, obviously, they're about real people. And I know several of the ones you've done, the real people are still alive. So, like for you, how involved are they then throughout
Mhm.
the film process? Do they just kind of hand you the story and let you run with it, or do you
Not,
keep
yeah,
them
not
in?
really. It really depends on the particular individual. So every movie is different, and we've had some that want to be very much involved, and we allow that. I mean, because at the end of the day, we want them to be able to sign off on the element of the story that we're telling.
Hmm.
Because if they don't believe it and they don't like it, then it's just going to be problematic as we get into it. So, when we did American Underdog, it was important for Kurt and Brenda to buy into how we told their story. It was important for us because otherwise we told them, look, we don't want to make this if you guys read this script that we're going to shoot. And it's like, oh, this is not accurate. And it just doesn't make any sense. So they had complete buy-in. They were with us every step of the way. It was very important to them. And we find that to be the case in a lot of the stories that we tell for the people that are still alive and still with us. So, and we love that. We welcome that with open arms.
That's awesome. Um, you mentioned a lot how, people really enjoy seeing these true stories. So I guess I'd be curious, like, what are maybe some of the biggest things you've learned when it's come to marketing true stories, especially when a lot of times people could just, go Google, how does the story end?
Yeah, look, everybody wants to, you go to a movie theater to have, 2 hours out of your day, you pay a ticket price to be able to enjoy an experience of a telling of a story, right? And so that's what cinema is, what movies are. And so for us, it's like, okay, how are we going to entertain people for those 2 hours or even allow them to learn something? At the end of the
Hmm.
day, I mean, how many movies have we been in that we actually learned something? We walked out, we go, you know what? I can apply this principle or that principle to my life and be better off for it. And so those are very important elements for us. As we go into it, it's for me. I want to be emotionally moved when I walk out of the theater, whether that's a comedy and it's laughter, or whether it's a drama and it's emotion, and the story's got to be able to move me there, and not in a forcible way where it's like, okay, I'm being told that I got to have this emotion. It's got to organically be able to move you to that spot. And so if we can get the story and the script to that place, then we know we've got something really special.
Nice. Yeah. And I think a lot of filmmakers kind of forget about that aspect of people can learn when they
Right.
are watching a movie too. And they just go after how do we entertain?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, a lot of filmmakers kind of go after, well, I like this without even contemplating whether somebody else will. And so, and usually that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, look, I'm guilty of it early on. Some of the stories
Hmm.
we did out of necessity, and I'm like, oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is entertaining. But we never thought of, okay, how are we going to market this to an audience?
Right.
So all of that is contemplated before we dive into any movie. If we don't know how we're going to market this movie, then we shouldn't take it on.
Yeah. No, I am also guilty of thinking I had a cool idea and not even really considering the marketing before
Right.
I pursued making it. I guess one more kind of question on the true story side of filmmaking. I would love to hear like what would be a piece of advice you would give to somebody that's maybe getting ready to make their first film based on a true story.
Yeah, don't be afraid. I mean, so often people are afraid of diving in. It's certainly a big endeavor, but what prohibits people more often than not is they just don't ever get started. And so
Hmm.
know that you're going to make mistakes. At the end of the day, you're going to make mistakes in making a movie. I mean, we still make mistakes after 30 something, 40 something movies. And so dive in. Don't just tap the water, dive in head first, full on, and go out there and make the movie that you believe this is the story that I need to tell to the world, and hope that you have a really good enough and compelling reason why.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I like that. Um, I would be curious because that's kind of what you're talking about there about just diving in. That's something I've always struggled with is like, how do I know if I'm getting in too deep to where like my inexperience is gonna hurt the production, versus like staying so safe that I'm never growing. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on how to judge there.
Yeah, I mean, everybody starts somewhere. I mean, you have to, that's the thing. You got to just dive in and surround yourself. This is what I tell people, surround yourself with people that are better than you. If you can pull that off, then it gives you some safeguards and able to kind of get through it, and gives you a better shot at success. But at the end of the day, I mean, what helped us with the first movie that we did is we had a distribution outlet. It was back during VHS times,
Okay.
when ministries were buying VHS copies. And so we had an order for the movie for a certain number of VHS tapes before we actually made the movie. And so that gave us the encouragement and the assurance that, look, we just got to get the movie made, and kind of take away the fear of what happens after we make it. And so that was a big thing that I didn't realize maybe going into it how big of a thing it was, but looking back might have been the smartest
Hmm.
decision that we ever made, was to have that sort of security blanket sitting there.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's some good thoughts. Um, so then I had kind of two wrap up questions here for you. So first one I'd love to hear your thoughts on is, with filmmaking, it's long hours, there's always a lot of like travel involved and stuff. So how do you go about building community from where you're based out of for when you're not gone, when you have those slow times, maybe during post or development, and you're not on the road?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's it's actually my community is bigger outside of the filmmaking world, which is kind of interesting. But it starts with just being grounded in a community and grounded in a church. My wife and I and our family, church is very important to us, and our family is very important. So having communication and carving out time for all of those things and bringing a balance to your life, I think is really critical. I think when you get so consumed by one thing, it can be really difficult and very challenging. So I'd say my encouragement to people as they're kind of diving into it is just make sure you have some balance in your life, because the filmmaking industry can be a grind. There's deadlines, there's this, there's that, there's expectations, there's all sorts of things. A lot of people want a lot of things, and but people expect updates if they're giving you money. I mean, there's all sorts of things, and so just have balance to your life so you can kind of keep yourself as much close to the normal meter as possible.
Yeah. No, that's good. Um, and then kind of my final wrap-up question, and I think you've kind of touched on this in some of your other answers, but would just be for somebody that's just getting started going down the journey of being a producer, what would be a piece of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, look, for me, I can just say what worked for me. For me, it was praying until I felt in my spirit that God was leading me in this direction. And until I got that assurance, the fear and the anxiety, there's still some, but for the most part, it's like, okay, I'm doing this with excitement. I'm doing this with energy, with knowing that God is behind me. He's got my back, and I'm going to embrace it, knowing that I'll probably fail in some ways. But I pray that there will be some successes as well. And no matter what the outcome is, I'm going to celebrate it, and I'm going to give God the glory no matter what. And I think if you're grounded in your faith, and if you're grounded in what your expectation is, then that will, whatever the outcome is, you're not going to be consumed by that while you're making it, and that will allow you to make the best potential story, best potential film as possible.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like the being grounded in your faith and expectations. I don't think I've heard anybody put it that way
Mhm.
before. Well, uh, those were the questions I had for you today, Kevin. So thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show.
It's good to meet you. Stay warm in Iowa.
I'll try.
And keep it up. Keep chasing what your passion is.
I will. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Producer Podcast. Come back each week this spring for more new episodes of the show. Also, releasing this March is the new book written by show host Micah Versman, The Producer's Life, A Practical Guide to Film Producing. The book looks to combine insights from Micah's producer journey with all the great stories and lessons shared by guests of the show over the first 5 seasons. Until next time, make sure to subscribe to the Producer Podcast, and thanks for listening.